It all started on a quiet evening when Sarah stumbled across an old toy at a neighborhood garage sale. It looked harmless at first, a small, worn-out doll with faded clothes and a cracked porcelain face. She didn't think much of it. Toys like this were everywhere, right? But something about its glassy eyes felt off, like they were following her every move. Shrugging off the chill running down her spine, Sarah took it home, thinking it would make for a quirky decoration. That's when things began to change. Late at night, strange sounds echoed through her house. Soft giggles, the faint tapping of tiny feet on the wooden floor, and the creak of doors that no one touched. Sarah tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, maybe even the house settling, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Even her dog, Max, refused to enter the room where the doll was kept, barking at it from a distance with his fur standing on end. Curious and a little scared, Sarah decided to set up a camera one night to catch whatever was happening while she slept. She didn't expect to see anything, maybe just a draft moving the curtains or a shadow caused by passing cars. But when she reviewed the footage the next morning, her blood ran cold. What the camera captured wasn't just a trick of the light. It wasn't her imagination. It was real, and it was far worse than she could have ever expected. The toy moved, on its own, and that was just the beginning. Sarah couldn't believe what she was seeing. The footage clearly showed the toy sitting still at first. Then, slowly, it turned its head towards the camera, its cracked smile seeming to stretch just a little wider. Sarah froze, replaying the clip over and over, hoping it was some glitch, some trick of the shadows. But every time she watched, it was the same chilling movement. She knew she hadn't imagined it. Feeling a mix of fear and curiosity, she decided to find out more about where the doll had come from. She went back to the garage sale the next morning, hoping to talk to the old woman who had sold it to her. But when she got there, the house was empty. Windows boarded up, grass overgrown. It looked like no one had lived there for years. Sarah asked a neighbor about it, but they just shook their heads and said, "That place? It's been abandoned for as long as I can remember." Confused and now more uneasy, Sarah brought the doll to her friend, Mark, who was into collecting old toys and antiques. Maybe he could explain it. Mark examined the doll carefully, noting its strange design, hand-stitched clothes, glass eyes that seemed too lifelike, and a small marking on the back of its neck that neither of them could read. It didn't match any brand or style he had ever seen. Later that night, Sarah started noticing more odd things. Items around her home would shift places. The TV would turn on by itself, always showing static. Whispers floated through the hallways, so soft she couldn't make out the words, but clear enough to know she wasn't alone. Her once peaceful home now felt heavy, like the walls themselves were closing in. And the doll, it wasn't always where she left it. Sometimes it would be sitting on the couch, other times it would be on the stairs, its cracked face staring up at her as if waiting. No matter where she moved it, no matter how carefully she tried to lock it away, it always found its way back out. The camera footage became even more disturbing each night. One clip showed the doll standing upright for a few seconds before falling back limp. Another showed it slowly crawling across the floor towards her bedroom door. Sarah knew she needed help. But who would believe her? It was just a toy, right? Or was it something much worse? Sarah couldn't sleep. Every creak and whisper in the house made her jump. Even Max, usually brave and loud, would whimper quietly and hide under the bed. She thought about throwing the doll away, but something inside her hesitated, like a strange pull she couldn't explain. Still, the next morning, she packed the doll in a box, sealed it tight with tape, and drove miles away to an old riverbank. She tossed the box into the rushing water, feeling a strange sense of relief as it disappeared into the current. But when she returned home, her heart nearly stopped. Sitting right there on the porch was the doll, soaked, muddy, but somehow smiling wider than before. Sarah backed away slowly, feeling tears sting her eyes. She wasn't just scared now, she was trapped, Meanwhile, Mark had been doing some digging. He found out that dolls like the ones Sarah had weren't normal collectibles. Some rumors spoke of handmade vessel toys, objects created not for children, but for something else entirely. They were meant to hold spirits, emotions, even curses. He tried calling Sarah, but her phone kept cutting out with static and strange whispering sounds. Desperate for answers, Mark visited a local historian who specialized in haunted objects. The old man, after seeing a picture of the doll, turned pale and immediately refused to get involved. Some things, he warned, aren't meant to be disturbed. Once invited, they don't leave easily. At home, Sarah was reaching her breaking point. The doll had started appearing in different places faster, almost like it was following her from room to room. Lights flickered. Cold spots formed around her even in the middle of the day. Mirrors would fog up and reveal handprints that weren't hers. The line between reality and nightmare blurred more with each passing hour. One night, just as Sarah was about to leave the house for good, she heard a faint knock at her bedroom door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Max began to growl low and deep, his eyes fixed on the door. Heart pounding, Sarah picked up her phone and started recording. She needed proof. Proof that she wasn't losing her mind. But when she slowly opened the door, what she found on the other side wasn't something she could ever have prepared for. And the worst part was, it wasn't alone. Sarah's hand trembled as she tightened her grip on the phone, the camera still recording. The door creaked open wider, and for a moment, there was nothing there but darkness. She leaned forward slowly, heart hammering so loud she could barely hear anything else. That's when she saw it. Not just the doll, but several others, all old, broken, and worn, standing silently in the hallway. Their glassy eyes stared straight at her, unmoving, but somehow alive with an energy that made her entire body freeze. She slammed the door shut and locked it, backing away until her legs hit the bed. Max barked wildly, spinning in circles, sensing the unseen threat creeping closer. Sarah's mind raced. She knew this wasn't just about one toy anymore. It was something bigger, something ancient, and it had found her. No matter what she did, no matter how far she tried to run, it was inside her home now. Maybe even inside her life. Meanwhile, Mark wasn't giving up either. After hearing nothing from Sarah, he decided to drive over to her place. The closer he got, the heavier the air seemed to feel. His headlights flickered as he pulled into the driveway. He noticed the front door slightly ajar, swinging gently in the wind. Something was very wrong. Back inside, Sarah tried to barricade herself in the room, pushing furniture against the door. But the knocking returned. Soft at first, then louder, more urgent. She could hear tiny footsteps racing up and down the hallway, giggling sounds that echoed and bounced off the walls. Her phone screen glitched, the recording stuttering as if the energy in the room was interfering with it. When she looked back at the footage she had just taken, her blood ran cold. Standing behind her in the reflection of the mirror wasn't just one doll. It was a shadowy figure, towering, with long, spindly arms reaching toward her. Mark burst through the front door, calling out her name. The house felt different now, colder, darker, like it was breathing on its own. As he rushed upstairs, he caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. It wasn't Sarah. It wasn't even human. Mark pressed on, heart pounding, as Sarah's screams echoed faintly through the walls. Upstairs, Sarah backed into a corner, clutching Max tightly against her chest. The dolls were closer now, forming a half circle around the room. She could see their tiny bodies twitching, heads tilting side to side like they were studying her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The house itself seemed alive, the walls warping and the floors groaning under an unseen weight. Mark finally reached the bedroom, his hands shaking as he grabbed the doorknob. He pushed it open with all his strength, but the sight that greeted him made him stumble backward. Sarah stood frozen, surrounded by the dolls, her eyes wide with terror. And just behind her, that dark figure loomed even closer, its face hidden in shadows, but its presence filling the entire room with dread. And then the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the room. For a few seconds, it was like the world had just stopped. No sound, no movement, just the deafening beat of Sarah's heart pounding in her ears. Mark fumbled for his phone, trying to use its flashlight, but the screen kept flickering, refusing to stay on. In the faint glow, he caught glimpses, the dolls shifting, Sarah slowly backing against the wall, and that looming figure growing larger, almost feeding on the fear hanging thick in the air. Suddenly, Max let out a sharp yelp and bolted from Sarah's arms. In the confusion, the dolls scattered like insects, vanishing into the shadows. Mark lunged toward Sarah, grabbing her hand. "We have to get out now," he hissed, yanking her toward the door. They stumbled down the hallway, half running, half falling, the walls seeming to close in around them. But as they reached the stairs, they realized they weren't alone. At the bottom stood a woman, or what used to be a woman. Her face was pale and cracked like porcelain, her eyes empty and hollow. In her arms, she cradled the original doll, stroking its hair slowly, whispering something neither Sarah nor Mark could understand. The air grew so cold that every breath they took came out in white clouds. The woman looked up at them, and a chilling smile stretched across her broken face. Sarah pulled back, her mind racing. This wasn't just a haunted toy. This was a haunting tied to something, someone. The woman wasn't just a ghost. She was the creator. The vessel toys were hers, and by taking the doll home, Sarah had unknowingly invited her and her entire cursed collection into her life. Before they could react, the walls of the house began to bleed dark stains, dripping down like ink. The floor under their feet vibrated as if something enormous was waking up below. The woman began to move up the stairs without walking, gliding eerily as the dolls reappeared behind her, climbing the walls, crawling along the ceiling, blocking every escape route. Mark tried to drag Sarah toward a window, but the glass twisted and melted under their hands, sealing them inside. Sarah's phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She pulled it out to see a message she hadn't sent flashing on the screen. "You belong to us now." Terror shot through her veins. This wasn't just about the doll anymore. It was about them, their lives, their souls, now trapped in this living nightmare. The house was no longer a house. It had become a prison, a living entity powered by the spirit of the toy maker and her cursed creations. And somewhere deep inside those walls, something else was waking up. Something much bigger, much older, and much hungrier. They had only minutes left before it found them, if escape was even possible anymore. The walls trembled violently now, the entire house groaning like it was alive. Mark gritted his teeth and yanked Sarah down a side hallway, searching desperately for any way out. Behind them, the ghostly woman and the dolls moved closer, their whispers growing louder, almost chanting. Sarah stumbled but kept moving, driven by pure fear. Her mind raced. If the toy maker was the source of all this, maybe breaking the original doll would end it. It was a crazy thought, but it was all they had. They burst into the living room, the dolls closing in fast. Sarah spotted the woman cradling the doll again, standing by the fireplace. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed a heavy iron poker from the hearth. The woman let out a piercing scream, her face twisting in rage as Sarah sprinted forward. With all her strength, she slammed the poker down onto the doll. The instant the doll shattered, a deafening roar filled the house. The woman and the dolls froze, their forms beginning to crack like glass under pressure. One by one, they started to break apart, fading into smoke. The darkness that had filled the house lifted slightly, replaced by a heavy silence. The walls stopped shaking. The floor steadied. Mark grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the front door, now swinging open freely. They ran into the cold night air, gasping, hearts pounding, as the house behind them seemed to collapse inward with a final, hollow sigh. It was over. They had made it out, or so they thought. As they stood in the middle of the street, Trying to catch their breath, Sarah felt something in her pocket. She reached in, confused, and pulled out a tiny shard from the broken doll. It was still warm, pulsing lightly like a heartbeat. Her stomach dropped. Before she could react, Max let out a low growl. They both turned to see a small figure standing at the end of the street, another doll, but this one was different. Its face was completely blank, no cracks, no smile, just empty, white porcelain. It stood motionless, staring at them as if waiting. The nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun. Sarah and Mark stood frozen, staring at the new doll at the end of the street. The air felt heavy again, but this time it wasn't chaos or panic. It was something else, something colder, more patient. They backed away slowly, not taking their eyes off it. Max growled low in his throat, but stayed close, as if knowing they were still in danger. Sarah tightened her hand around the shard from the broken doll, feeling its strange warmth fading now, growing colder with every second. They didn't wait to see what would happen next. Mark pulled Sarah toward his car, and without a second thought, they sped off into the night, leaving the ruined house and the blank-faced doll behind. The further they got, the lighter Sarah felt, like some invisible chain had finally snapped. But deep down, she knew this wasn't something she could just outrun. Some things, once touched, never really let go. Over the next few days, Sarah and Mark tried to piece together everything that had happened. They researched the town records and found out the house once belonged to a woman named Annabelle Hartwick, a reclusive toy maker rumored to have lost her family under mysterious circumstances. People said she turned to dark rituals, believing she could trap lost souls in toys, giving her the family she had lost. Her workshop had burned down decades ago, but a few of her creations were never found. It became clear that the doll Sarah had bought wasn't just an ordinary toy. It was one of the last surviving pieces of Annabelle's work, and by destroying it, they hadn't freed themselves. They had only woken up something older, something that had been waiting. Sarah decided to leave town, hoping distance would keep her safe. Mark stayed behind, determined to learn more and find a real way to stop whatever was now attached to them. They promised to keep in touch, but deep down, neither of them felt truly safe anymore. Some nights, when Sarah lay awake in her new apartment far away, she would hear faint whispers or catch a glimpse of a small shadow in the corner of her eye. She told herself it was just her imagination. But every time, without fail, she would find a tiny footprint in the dust by her door. A reminder. The creepiest toy ever caught on camera wasn't just a horror story. It was now part of her life forever.